The average human spends 47%, close to 50% of their waking hours mind wandering. Now you might think, oh, mind wandering, that created the Apple iPhone. This is mind wandering on annoyances from the past or worries about the future. It's time travel mind wandering.
Right.
And it creates stress and anxiety, and it takes away happiness and joy. And that is half our day where we're not
just
actually
doing that.
Takes away productivity.
Yeah.
And the easiest way is to have strategies and techniques and tools that interrupt and circuit break that amygdala hijack.
Yeah. So Sarge, great to have you here.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Thank you so much for coming along and agreeing to do this podcast for us.
No, really, honour's mine. Thank you.
I've known you a few years now. We were just saying before we came on that, like, so much of it in the last few years being online or on the computer screen and that, so it's great to actually be live and in person.
We spent so much time on Zoom during COVID, post-COVID.
Yeah.
This is the first time that we're actually meeting face to face.
I know. Unbelievable.
Incredible.
Who'd have thought? So my relationship with you is generally through Landmark Worldwide.
Yes.
Personal and self-development company.
Yes.
And we've both been leaders in that company at various times in various guises.
That's
right. Do you just want to give us a little bit of background to yourself generally?
Yes. So I am East African Asian, born in Kenya.
Right.
Spent most of my childhood outdoors in Kenya. And we left Kenya when I was 8 years old. So I came over from sunshine to, I remember it clearly. It was December, and it was snowing, cold. And then when January came and I started school, the first day of school, I turned up in my grey Kenyan school shorts. On a winter's
day, yeah.
And that became
that was a shock.
That was a shock, but it was also the start of really understanding how certain mindsets and certain past experiences start getting embedded.
Yes.
So at that point, there was a situation in the assembly where the headmaster introduced me as the new boy from Kenya. I stood up. There's my shorts. Everyone else is in their blazers and their jackets.
Yeah.
And there was this sort of, laughter, background laughter, and that was at the point where I thought, "Wow, I'm different."
Yeah.
And straight ahead of me, those sort of benches that you have in the gyms.
Yeah.
The assembly was set up. And there was one of the other students there who just nudged his friend and made room for me to come back and sit down.
Yeah.
To this day, he's been my best friend.
Brilliant. Isn't that amazing how stuff like that happens and occurs? And then, and it's what we do in personal development, isn't it, really? It's looking at where you are now, and then it's like, well, how did you get to be the person you are today? And it all relates back to experiences exactly like that.
Absolutely. There's certain experiences and certain things where I think the community and the stories and the ideals and some of the standards that then get created then creates a certain mindset.
Yeah, definitely. And then what do you do today? Because obviously you're here on this podcast.
Yes.
It's all about people being, reinventing a business, running a business. You've got a very interesting project, which is why we've got you on. So do you want to say a little bit about what you're doing today?
I trained as a pharmacist, and we had our own community pharmacy business, which I grew and then sold. And why we sold it was at that time I decided not to be a pharmacist anymore and retrain as a lawyer, and became a lawyer in the pharmaceutical industry. So AstraZeneca was the company that I'd spent most of my corporate life in as head of legal and then various other pieces. And then it was towards the end of my time at AstraZeneca where I realized that with the technology revolution coming in, is there a way that we could use technology to actually help patients deal with the diagnosis of their conditions?
Right.
And that was around the stress and the anxiety that it causes before they get diagnosed with their condition.
Yeah.
because the stress has already started, and it's can we make an interruption to that stress that actually has a different outcome around the disease.
Wow.
And that was my the idea, and that was at a time when I thought, I'm in a pharmaceutical company which is all about drugs and amazing drugs for cancer, for all sorts of different conditions, and I'm a pharmacist who is effectively talking about drugs and giving medicines. But when I was researching the powers of the mind and the body, and you know, we cut ourselves, and miraculously something happens, and you re-heal the wound. So there's something that we have the power to. We just don't have a DIY manual that tells us what to do and when. And that's when my professional and personal development journey sort of started, understanding the mindset, researching breath work, became a breathwork coach, started looking at all of the different ancient wisdom that's just been lost because new technology has kind of taken over, and our attention spans are reduced, and various other things. And it made me think that we could actually use technology for good to actually bring more presence, more focus, more awareness in the moment, and reduce stress at the same time when it really matters, when the stress comes up. And so that was a point at which I decided to leave AstraZeneca and develop this invention, this technology, and formed a partnership with someone who was at AstraZeneca with me, who was headed up our oncology business, and then went on to be the MD for another pharmaceutical company. And we co-joined forces, and we set up a health technology company called Momentous Technologies, which is all about mastering stress in the moment. And I talk about mastering stress because stress gets a really bad rap. You know, it's like, it's bad for you. Actually, stress saves lives. If you're crossing the road and you see a bus, it's that fight or flight that actually takes you out of the the danger. The problem is that we haven't evolved enough that when we're in a meeting, the same sort of stress reactions could happen like a bus coming on, but it's through conversations. So what's actually happening? The conversation creates a stress response, and then we react in a fight or flight situation that then has a lot of negative outcomes. What if you could create a circuit breaker in those moments? And that's what
it's very true, isn't it? Because most people have or get stressed from having to interact with other human beings at some level.
Correct.
And I imagine it's from, like say, when you're young and the new boy in the school wearing your shorts, right through to sitting around a boardroom table,
absolutely,
and being the one that how do I impress in front of my peers or my seniors?
And it's great that you say that, because for me it was about the impress. It became the way of dealing with that 8-year-old boy being laughed at. Well, how can I use this? Oh, well, actually, I've got something unique. I could make fun of the fact that I grew up in a jungle or had a giraffe as my pet. And I could actually be a sense of belonging. So comedy became a way of dealing with a story that I'd created, which is I'm different. In those moments, and then you see certain mindset things being ingrained, which allows you to just deal with those stories that get created. But there's no fulfillment there, and the real fulfillment actually comes from realizing that the story was created by an 8-year-old. In a 50-year-old,
which is great, isn't it? Because that comes into the comedy. Because it's like, as soon as it's like, right, okay, it's like, I'm an 8-year-old.
And the absurdity of that, and the reality of it, comes in, and so that's where the real turning point for me, Austin, even around the technology, was I thought I was living a sort of purpose-driven career and a life, but the purpose was to impress people. the purpose was these sort of cultural conversations growing up, which is actually success is an accomplishment or money.
Yeah.
And that became so externally referenced that everything I did was through the lens of, I'm only going to be liked or loved if I've done this, if I've done that, if I've done that.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending game.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yes, exactly. And so it was, and I was incredibly close to my parents, particularly so my late father.
Yeah.
Growing up, it was all about playfulness. It was all about creativity. It was all about, before this, we talked about sort of dismantling the watch to see how it worked. He always said, like, if you don't know how it works, ask people.
Yeah.
Learn how the internals work. Now, my hack for that was to actually break toys to really see. And then eventually I became more sophisticated at sort of breaking things down and then putting them back up again. Yeah. And my dad taught me all of that. But it got lost in my corporate career.
Yes.
My corporate career became about impressing people again.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of tapping into like my authentic self or my creative self. And it wasn't until I lost my father unexpectedly while I was on holiday in Kenya with my mum. And I got the news while I was on holiday traveling around India. And he'd passed away in his sleep. Now, the moments before he passed away, he was doing the thing that he absolutely loves. Which was, and he hasn't done this for a while, but he had a pizza,
right? Okay,
and a beer. And he'd never combined the two. But there was this moment where my mum said it was very odd that he just ordered a pizza and a beer, and he was so satisfied, and he went to sleep.
Yeah,
so satisfied, and he died in his sleep that night.
Yeah. When
I got to the funeral in Kenya, there was all of these thoughts of why, like I'd left. There was no sign that this was coming, and all of those things. And I was the eldest son, sort of wanting to write the eulogy. No words would come out, and there we are, and close to 1,000 people turn up at the funeral. Now this is like Indian weddings are big.
Yeah,
Indian funerals are just as big, but very somber.
Yeah,
and one by one, people came to pay their respects, and we're sitting in a line there, and I'm the eldest, so I stand up and people put their hand on my shoulder. And instead of saying, I'm really sorry, they would share a story that my dad had inspired joy in them.
Yeah.
That had given them some aliveness, or some happiness, or some laughter.
Yeah.
I'd not heard these stories. I'd heard other stories that my dad would share, but these were from strangers, from family members that I was disconnected with. And each and every story was about how my dad influenced their joy, inspired their joy, that then led to a bit of a breakthrough. And at that point, I got that that's not what I was doing in my corporate life.
Yeah.
I wasn't about inspiring joy in others. And so there was this sort of moment where 1946-2013 was what was projected behind with his photo.
Yeah.
And I got that dash of joy for him. His legacy was all about inspiring joy in other people.
Yeah.
It wasn't about getting trapped in the luxury and the status. It's about contributing in a way that becomes that legacy. And in the cremation, I made a promise to my dad that that's going to be my research and my investigation into like inspiring joy in myself, but actually others. And then that's what then is what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
It led to the research. It led to the book that I wrote. It led to everything that I'm doing, which is I haven't got the answer yet. But the discovery of all of the different ways that we can become more present, more focused, more loving, more playful, more creative is what I'm absolutely loving discovering.
Yeah. And I think that is the thing, isn't it? It's I mean, we know from personally, the older you get, the danger can be that creativity, playfulness, all of that, it just gets suppressed.
Yes.
And then we think, we shouldn't be like that anymore. And actually the joy comes from discovering, actually I can.
Absolutely.
And that's what I should be doing. And that's what gives you a sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, one of my regrets was there was a period where I was a somebody in corporate life.
Right, okay, yeah.
But somebody in a sense of, oh, look where I'm going, this sort of ego. What I really missed were those moments with my children. And actually choosing being present in those moments when they're playing football on the pitch. And God knows how many goals I've actually missed because I've been in my head or on an email responding to something. And then making up for it, taking them to having an ice cream and things like that, like some guilt being guilt massaged over. And what I really got that when I became a father, that was the most joyful I've ever been, and the most creative and free and playful. My eldest son was into cars at a very young age, and we'd take some boxes, and I basically made a Ferrari. Wow. Spray painted and everything like that out of cardboard boxes, a steering wheel that we got from an auction, and it was effectively a Ferrari. Just a box version of it. My son spent hours and hours in that, and we'd create stories around it. When he could hold a paintbrush, I bought a big canvas. Summertime, we'd go outside, we'd just get loads of paints, and we'd have this long sort of overall so that we mess our clothes up, and we would let loose, like just paint. That painting, when my second was born, same thing happened every year. Come out. Then my wife, myself, my two sons would bring out this painting every year, and we would just get creative. It stopped the moment that I became about my work and getting somewhere. And it didn't restart until a year after my father passed away. And it's now in its 18th year of creation, this painting.
Brilliant.
So those like what you said about playfulness, what I realized, and now what I advise a lot of companies on, is there's a joy gap in companies.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you look at innovative companies like Google and Lego, they've actually brought play back into the corporate environment, into the workplace. Because when you are actually laughing with your colleagues, when you are actually playing games, it might be purposeless play, but actually that taps into some sort of creative spark in the brain.
It does.
That has some ideas come up naturally. And so that we're using that analogy as well in the technology that we're kind of developing, is how do you get people into that creative play mode?
So important, isn't it, that those people, I think nowadays, scoff a little bit at team building days for companies and all of that. It was the rage at one point. But definitely in the Flame Academy, we were like, look, go do it again. And that, because it's exactly what you say. It's like people feed off other people, engage.
Definitely.
In those games, it gets those creative juices flowing, and it brings camaraderie. And and also, people get to understand their colleagues more. And when you show some vulnerability, and that's very engaging with people. To go, I always had the impression that person was this way, and actually they're not. They're this way.
And it's so key what you just said around letting that guard down, letting that mask down, and actually showing yourself. And that is vulnerability. When I was in corporate, and it had nothing to do with the corporate environment that I was in. It was a corporate environment. It was all about serious work. And I was a lawyer, so that's like as serious as you can get it, right? And it was the stories that I'd created that it needs to be a certain way. I need to be in a pinstripe suit, and I need to be a certain way and be serious. And there was when I was a lawyer, there was another senior lawyer that happened to make a comment to me and said, "You're too nice to be a good lawyer. You know, like as if that is the way it should be.
Yeah.
Like you have like these labels that we actually create for certain roles, and you have to sort of pigeonhole yourself into that label when it's not actually who you really are.
Yeah.
And I saw loads of those examples of, if you want to get ahead in a corporate environment, you've got to not show any weakness, not be vulnerable, not speak up. Keep to this, and then you'll go far. And I think that's the challenge. I think it's changing now with the younger sort of corporate workforce coming in, really connected more to purpose rather than pay. And so there is a shift in there. But I still think that other than just team building days, even in a working environment, how do you bring play into your standard meeting? How do you start your meeting at the beginning? You have your agenda and then everyone starts. Or could you spend 5 minutes to just sort of almost get out what's in people's heads coming into that meeting, and then you kind of go in. So there's lots of different strategies to bring that element in the day-to-day corporate environment.
And I think even in, with people running small businesses, it's about understanding their staff or their suppliers or their customers and bringing that into it. Because a lot of people, they've got a product or they've got a service and they're passionate about it, and it's like, right, let's start a company and get it out there. And then they have an idea of, oh, I'm now supposed to be this way because I now own my own business.
That's it.
And that's what they project.
That's it.
And then because it's not the authentic them, it doesn't work. And then they decide, oh, well, I'm obviously just not good enough to run a business. It's not for me. And all that needs to happen is like, take that. I think we're going to talk about it a bit later, but like that mask off. And just be the authentic you. And it will be great.
And it's I mean, that's it's critical what you've just said around being the authentic you. And I'll just give you a simple example. I spent sort of 20 or so years in a corporate environment. 16 of those were in corporate senior positions in AstraZeneca. Corporate working is completely different.
It is,
to having your own business. And the first sort of 6 months, me and my business partner, we were bringing a corporate mindset to a startup business and getting annoyed and frustrated why it's not moving. Because we were doing everything ourselves, and it requires a different set of skills. And I think your flame principles highlight all of those. But in those flame principles, all of those in a corporate environment is done by somebody else. You're the leader, but you're outsourcing all of that work. How do you, in the corporate environment, in a startup environment and starting your own business, it's those principles. How do you actually bring that in so that you're not the jack of all trades, but actually you are a master of all of those because you've got the right connections and you've got the right team around you.
Exactly that. I think that's exactly what it is. And, most people who come to the academy, a lot of them are at that stage where they've started their business. They've got a certain amount of sort of down the road, a certain amount. And then they're like, okay, I'm stuck now. Because it is that, how do I do all of those components? How do I be the master of them, not just a jack of all trades? How do they actually get done? And it's what you say and what we say, it's about surrounding yourself with the right people, like in whatever environment. And we'll say, look, obviously the Flame Academy helps that because we're a community of like-minded people, so we can all help each other. Because the other thing I have is generally as human beings, we actually have a want to help each other. We actually do.
100%.
It can get hidden behind shyness or fear of confrontation sometimes or whatever. But actually, if you get into the heart of who most people are, they actually just want to help. And when you can get that environment around you, then you can start to flourish. You can start to take on all those different aspects and find the right way of building on all of them. But it's coming from an authentic place, not I think I should be acting and behaving in this way because I now own my own business. You know?
It's beautiful what you've just shared, and I can just see myself in my own journey in what you just shared, because I was doing well in the corporate environment.
Yeah.
I was making money, had a great house and a great family in London, and drove a good car, and all of those external reference points of success.
Yeah.
But there was a lack of fulfillment
Mm.
that wasn't then taken away when I just earned or had a promotion, or when I'd just done something. The real fulfillment came when I was actually contributing to somebody else and someone else's growth.
Very good,
And that's when I chose to leave corporate life to actually create something that can transform health, can transform stress and anxiety. And when I was researching my book, one of the things in the research, now as a pharmacist, the number one medicine that we were dispensing as a pharmacist were antidepressants. Other than, your antibiotics, which were prolific, but the antidepressants were left, right, and center. That's what we were getting strips for. It was like M&Ms. And then when I was researching, and it wasn't due to COVID, but just before COVID, young people getting prescribed antidepressants as a way of dealing with day-to-day stresses. Now, I have 2 young people at home. And that wasn't a future I want for them to live into, that when they get into a corporate workforce, the only way that they can go through the day is to pop a pill that would numb them from dealing with the stress and anxiety. And that's really...
So that's the driving factor behind what you're doing.
Factor is to actually be in a place where young people are future leaders of the world and transformation agents are actually able to deal with and are more resilient on a day-to-day level of all of the distractions, the stresses that come their way, and they're armed with knowing that this is the journey because there's something that they're actually working towards and actually driving a purpose and a vision which is bigger than themselves.
And so when did you leave AstraZeneca to actually start this journey?
That was during COVID.
Right, okay.
Which most people would advise against.
Yes.
And that was a point.
Especially a pharmaceutical company through COVID.
Especially a pharmaceutical company. And it was just around the time AstraZeneca obviously was one of the manufacturers of the COVID vaccine. And it was around that time where my ideas were really forming. And I'd spoken to a number of scientists and neuroscientists and really about, wow, there is a need and a want.
Definitely.
That isn't going to necessarily be addressed by a pill. And that was the real sort of calling to say, right, I don't know how it's going to look, but I'm gonna try it. If not now, when?
When? And what stage are you at now? So
we are
2 or 3 or 4.
Well,
4 years.
2 years of research and development.
Okay.
And we've now got down to a device, a handheld device as a prototype. So and we've just tested it. So the look and the feel of it, which is great. The feedback was brilliant. And then we're now going to go into an 80 people study to test that in 2 minutes of playing with the device, in the moment of stress or anxiety, it brings focus back. It reduces your stress and it changes your breathing pattern to a more resonant sort of frequency.
And what do you think your journey to your marketplace will be? Who's your main customers going to be? How are they going to get access to this device?
Yeah, so we're initially a business to business play, which is really looking at corporate and young professionals entering the corporate workforce, where stress and anxiety could come up very quickly. But how do you then address that? And it's not necessarily about the stress and anxiety, it's actually how do you create a circuit breaker when the stress and anxiety comes up that then makes them more productive in the moment.
Right.
So it's more around creating sort of more productivity for a corporate, but from a day-to-day individual's perspective, it's actually interrupting the stress response and preventing it from piling up and becoming chronic stress, and then chronic stress leading to all of the chronic conditions that we deal with today.
And it's great at the moment, isn't it? Because, and I think probably a bit to do with COVID as well, but the duty of care that employers now have to employees, there's much more focus on that, and much more focus on mindset and stress and anxiety. You know, I could give lots of examples of people I know, even in my own family, that, you know, where stress and anxiety now plays a major part in how they experience life.
Yes, I mean, anxiety, depression, the World Health Organization says that that's its own sort of epidemic of anxiety and depression. And well, it's a 21st century sort of a pandemic. And we're not necessarily putting the same resources into solving that. We've created an industry of quick fixes, but not really looking at, could it be to do with inflammation in the body, and is it a vicious circle? Could it be to do with the mind-body connection? You know, there's lots of ways of sort of interrupting stress, but really getting to the core of why does it come up in the first place? And that's why personal and professional development programs really help to understand, first of all, your own mindset and why you do the things that you do that go one way or versus another. And what's the story behind it that you can actually interrupt. But in today's world, there's no time for meditating in a mountain and spending retreat, 2 weeks on a retreat and things like that. We don't have the time. So the real emphasis was, how could we utilize the time that people do have in between meetings, during meetings, and actually bring a technology that then enables them in that moment without having to do a whole load of work. And it's a very, very simple science. Whenever something happens, our amygdala is kind of the monkey brain sort of starter. It gets hijacked. And it's the stress response that starts, adrenaline kicks in, gets your heart rate going, then cortisol starts showing up as a stress hormone, and it floods the system. And it's really a survival tactic that worked for our ancestors to save them from lions in the savannah. But in a meeting, there are no lions, there's just words and thoughts that get created. But biologically, it's exactly the same thing as a lion attacking you. All of your faculties are going away from the rational thinking brain into getting you ready. Stress is an energy that's getting you ready. It's a rocket fuel that's getting you ready to either fight or run away to survive. Now, in that moment, in a meeting, and a thought comes up, and the stress hormones start, and you've got this rocket fuel bubbling up inside of you. You can't go for a marathon run inside of the meeting. What happens? You go into your head, and you start mind wandering. There's a famous study by Harvard, which basically said, and there's been various studies around that, but the average human spends 47%, close to 50% of their waking hours mind wandering.
Wow.
Now you might think, oh, mind wandering, that created the Apple iPhone. Like the creativity. No, this is mind wandering on annoyances from the past or worries about the future. It's time travel mind wandering. Half of the day, and it creates stress and anxiety, and it takes away happiness and joy. And that is half our day where we're not just actually doing that. Takes away productivity. The easiest way is to have strategies and techniques and tools and technologies that give that interrupt and circuit break that amygdala hijack and give you a little bit of a time for your higher functioning brain to take over and say, I can respond in this way.
Yeah.
I don't need to react that way.
Is breathwork part of that?
Breathwork is definitely part of that.
We've spoken about
absolutely,
that.
yeah. So
tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, so when I'll tell you my own story, and it's the first chapter in my book. When my father passed away, my mum was beside him, and when I spoke to my mum afterwards, I said, "Mum, what's your recollection of those last moments?" And she just said this one thing that is still in her mind, that he was breathing really heavily, and she couldn't wake him up. So it was like, and then she just remembers this one distinct bit, which was a, and then there was silence. It was this out breath. And when she told me that, I remembered my eldest son, who's now 19. When he was born, we were in the hospital. It's just amazing. He was born, but he was blue and wasn't breathing. And they did all of the usual things, tapping the back, and he wasn't breathing.
Yeah.
And it might have just been minutes, but for us, like me and my wife, it was like, what's happening? Oh my God. And they took him under one of those incubator heat lamps, and they were trying everything, massaging his chest, and nothing. There was just, he was lifeless.
Yeah.
And they called an emergency doctor, pediatrician. Pediatrician came in, did a few things, checked the pulse, and at this point, I know, we're panicking and asking what's going on, and there's nothing coming out. And the doctor then just flicked the soul of my son, and the blue suddenly just went pink, and all we saw was and a scream.
Yeah.
And it was an in-breath, and that got me thinking, well, death is the out-breath, life is the in-breath, and all we're doing is breathing in between.
Yeah.
So how much of our breath determines our health and our longevity, and how are we actually breathing? So I started experimenting on myself, really, first of all, just noticing how I'm breathing when I'm really joyful and happy and with friends and family and laughing. What am I doing? Noticing when stress comes up, when I'm about to go into a board presentation, or the anxiety comes up, how am I breathing? What I realized was whenever I'm stressed or anxious or apprehensive about performing, or wanting to look good and do a good job, I hold my breath. I'm not breathing. And whenever I'm in the mix of an argument or a heated debate or something like that, I'm breathing very shallow but fast over here. Now, knowing that, I thought, well, I can interrupt that surely, because breathing, although it's automatic, you can also consciously change your breathing.
You can, yeah.
And how many times do we actually think about changing our breathing pattern when we're stressed? We don't. I trained as a breathwork coach, understanding the science, the mechanics, the art of breathing. And I did it at the times when I was least stressed. And I noticed that most people, when we first set up our company, we did some market research. 400 people in the UK that we researched, a different demographic, a good demographic. 1 in 4 people in the UK practice breathwork for stress relief.
Wow.
1 in 4 people. When do they practice it?
First thing in the morning.
Not at times of stress.
Exactly.
And that was the piece. It was like, why? Because when the stress response starts, the immediacy of getting yourself out of danger is what the body is really responsible for, keeping you safe.
It is, exactly
and it's so quick. So to then, in that quick moment, to start thinking like, oh wait, hold on, my breathing is now 16 breaths per minute. Let me try and get it down to 5 or 6 breaths per minute, and consciously counting it. That's not going to happen in a corporate environment, is it? Or someone with an Apple Watch
Yes.
saying, can I just take a 10-minute break, going into the toilets, switching on some sort of breathing app or some sort of meditation app and meditating for 5 minutes. It's not practical or workable.
Yeah.
But there are ways that you can actually bring presence in.
Yeah.
One of them is tactile interaction.
Yeah.
So if you notice, do you get stressed, Austin?
Yes.
Is there a telltale sign that someone would notice when you get stressed? What do you do?
Oh, what a good question. Well, I tend to switch off from communication with them, and I'll go into myself.
Okay.
Probably become more agitated.
Yeah. And
quicker.
What would that agitation look like physically, outwardly? Like, what would you see you doing?
Probably fiddling with my hands, stuff like that comes across.
Yeah.
Can also be in communication where right now keeping eye contact.
Yeah.
I'd probably my eyes would be above your head somewhere and flicking around because my thoughts are going somewhere.
Brilliant. Well, it's great that you just shared that, because that's exactly the thing that actually happens when the stress response starts.
Yeah.
Before you even get into a thought process of handling it, your body's already starting to react to the rocket fuel that's been there. And part of that energy is twitching or twiddling or fidgeting or biting your nail or twiddling your hair. And you'll be able to notice that when someone's gone into their head.
Yeah.
What we're doing is you can harness that energy and take it into a different way of tactile interaction, which doesn't keep you locked in a in a fidget system that then creates more negative mind wandering. It actually takes that energy out and that focus out. And that's the way that you can start harnessing, because when you're fidgeting, that is a stress relief mechanism. It's a coping mechanism.
It is,
and what it's when if you think about children, how do they learn? They learn by touch.
Yeah.
When they want to walk, they learn by touching things. They learn.
Yeah.
And most of our nerves in our hands are connected to both the left and the right side of the brain.
Yeah.
So when you're touching, not only got the rational, logical brain sort of kicking off, but you've also got the creative bits.
Right.
That's why Lego is so popular.
Yes.
Because what you're doing is you're actually learning with your hands.
Yeah.
You're thinking with your hands.
Yeah.
That's the bit that we're now bringing into a technology where you actually get to play in the moment.
Yeah.
And get present.
Perfect. I'm going to buy a big Lego box. In fact, I'm going to just get some off my granddaughters. They've got the biggest box in the world of Lego.
Well, one of the things that I, also in my research is Lego have then created a whole leadership development program around. Now it's Lego Serious Play.
Yeah.
Which is, how do you in your traditional meetings, and if it was innovation and creating new ideas, you'd kind of go in there and you'd post-it note loads of things and you'd ask people. Bringing Lego into the environment in a structured way as a Lego Serious Play actually has people build models of the creations and the ideas and innovations that they want by asking a powerful question based on what would a model of the top 10 leadership behaviors that you want in your company look like. And you build a model. Rather than thinking about it, you build a model.
I love that.
Now you can articulate and take people through the model, and it embeds in people's brains. So it's a beautiful, beautiful way, but it's all about thinking with your hands rather than your head.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It's just how a simple change in pattern or behaviour, the transformation that can
it's
cause.
Brilliant. Yeah, really good.
You've mentioned your book. It's called Joynetics.
Yes.
Unlock Your Joy Potential. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so the book really came about when I'd made the promise to my dad, and the promise, I didn't realize, became my own. I became the guinea pig of what is this thing called joy.
Yeah.
read loads of books, did loads of personal development programs to really try and understand joy. There's a lot written on anxiety, stress, and depression. There's a lot written on happiness, this sort of hedonic, how to be happy, and there's so many books on that. But the least researched and documented emotion or way of being was joy. Because I experienced joy when I lost my father. Joy is one of those sort of ways of being that you can be sad and still have access to joy.
Yeah. Okay.
And it kind of goes hand in hand. Now, happiness is kind of the opposite of sadness.
Yeah.
And so you either gravitate towards this sort of happiness and avoid the pain of the sadness, as joy kind of is this sort of encompassing area or a way of being.
Yeah.
And I got fascinated about that, which is that's where we come from.
Yeah.
Children
Yes.
are just joyful.
Yeah.
And then they have these moments of tantrums and this and the other, and then they're back to their default state of joy. So this idea started of like, well, today, if we look at the modern world, stress and anxiety seems to be the default nature, the default way of being during the day. And I said, well, imagine if in the next 5 years, there's a radical transformation of that, where actually joy is the default way of being and stress is the exception. What would that look like? And what that looked like for me was to realize where areas of my life where there isn't joy, and kind of discovering, well, what is it about this area of life, whether it's finances, whether it's business, whether it's a specific relationship, really looking where joy is missing and getting fascinated and interested in understanding that. And that became the research behind the book.
Wow.
I call it joy of life triggers. They're these little jolts that are featured throughout the book, with each chapter being a specific area. So the first chapter is all about the biggest stress reliever is right under our nose. It's breathing. But how do you utilize that in the right way? And my research took me to an acronym which I use throughout the book, which is Notice, Reset, and Generate.
Right.
That's NRG. Now, what do I mean by notice? Well, the first thing, instead of trying to just go in there and fix something because you think it's wrong, is actually just notice what's happening. So when I talked about my breathing, at the moments when stress arose, I just brought a little bit of conscious awareness. Oh, I'm feeling angry or frustrated. Let me just bring my awareness and notice what my breathing is doing. Just that little bit of focus started changing my breathing pattern. And then you realize, okay, well, I am breathing faster, 14 breaths per minute, 16 breaths per minute. When someone's stressed, it's even more. Well, the research then shows, well, where do you get calmness? Where do you get harmony? There's a place called, it's a coherent resonant frequency. And that's at about 6 breaths per minute, where your heart rate and your breathing rate are synchronized.
Okay.
And it creates effectively the flow state. We talked about the flow state. If you can get yourself from that high heart rate, a breathing rate, down to a 6 breaths per minute, which is 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale, and do that for a couple of minutes, you're actually back in the present moment. And those, you can reset that. So you've got the notice, which is just notice what's not working. And then reset it, because there are strategies, science, techniques that are available that you can reset. And then the generation is generate an actual purpose-driven angle, rather than this sort of stress-fueled, what's the purpose of why you want to do this? So actually creating that intention. And the generation for me was all about inspiring joy. In the moments where I'm stressed, I've forgotten about that.
And I mean, since obviously that seminal moment when your dad passed away, you've like done the book. I know you've done a very successful TED talk. We'll talk about that in a minute. And now setting up your company with your partner to have this. I'll call it like a disruptive device. If you like.
Yes.
I just love everything that's a disruptor.
Yeah.
I think it's so important in the world nowadays.
It's brilliant you say that, because reinvention, and I know we're talking about reinventing businesses, is all about having that disruptive mindset. Not disruption in the sense of a rebellion.
No, exactly.
But disruption that not being satisfied with the status quo.
Yeah, challenges it, doesn't it?
Challenges it.
Very much so. Yeah.
Our business models in business have been the same a certain way, but actually, what if you could reimagine the business model?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs with Apple did exactly that.
Yeah.
1,000 songs in your pocket with the iPod.
I know.
But the point there was the business model wasn't about the songs. The songs were almost the giveaway.
Yeah.
It was actually then locking in a product.
Yes.
And a subscription and all of those things that kind of come. He reinvented a business model.
Yeah.
And then you see a lot of technology companies using the same thing. And I think that reinvention is critical in every stage of a business.
Yeah.
But also the reinvention of yourself.
Yes. Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because I was going to come on to there's creating the business, and that for a lot of people is new.
Yes.
And then what they don't realise, perhaps, is that in setting that business up, yes, you have to reinvent yourself as well.
Yeah.
And within the Flame Principles, finance is obviously important, because without the right finances behind you, you're not really going to get a business. No. But the second part is the leadership.
Yeah.
And leadership is so important and it's about how you lead yourself.
Yes.
And how you lead others.
Yes.
Through your work with Landmark, for instance, in personal self-development and the work I've done, what sort of things would you say, actually, that's the most important part of personal development for you to understand about yourself that would have a material impact on you being successful or being able to be successful in running a business?
It's a great question. No, it's a great question. Immediately, I have a response to that, which is having a framework and a community that is there that you're tapping into.
Yeah.
But that requires a level of authenticity to drop the masks, that the egos that you've had, and actually have the trust of that community and sharing. So it's having a framework. It's having people as trusted listeners.
Yes.
And having the courage to share authentically what's working, what's not working, and where your head's going. One of what I would say success factors of me and my business partner coming together isn't that we've come from an incredibly successful corporate career and our CVs look amazing. No, it's not that. It's actually we've got a mindset where when he's down, I'm there.
Yeah.
And that having each other's backs.
Yeah.
But how we do that when we're going into pitches or when we're going into investor presentations is we will spend about half an hour before each of those meetings, not about the meeting. It will be about clearing the I want to call it a toilet brain, the thoughts that are going on, the nonsense that's going on, because you don't want to go into those meetings. You want to be 100% productive. You want to be at your top potential. So we clear each other.
Brilliant. Yeah. And
it's the most powerful thing that didn't used to happen when we were in a corporate environment. Now, when I was in AstraZeneca, and I was one of the founding members of the digital health R&D department, developing one of their flagship technology products and leading it. When I put my team together, that practice of before you get into your PI planning stages and starting to develop all of these amazing plans on how we're going to deliver a technology, we're going to actually sit down and we're going to say, right, what's happening?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Tell me what.
So important.
It's so important because when you get that out of the head, you've got an emptiness there that you're then going to create something from.
Very good, yeah.
Which is really, really powerful. So I can't, to all of your listeners, that is one of the critical factors that's made Dan and I, my business partner, successful in not getting so bogged down and stressed about the journey and the hurdles. And the best time that it's helped is when things don't go according to plan.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of that to get used to in a business that that you're passionate about.
Definitely. I mean, again, a lot of the businesses come to us and their owners are so passionate about their product and service. That passion in itself brings stress and anxiety because they're so, I've got this message or this product, it's got to work. And I think it's great what you say as well, because we teach, look, whatever you do, always be clear of, well, what's your aim of that? What's the intended outcome of whatever you do, whether it's a phone call to a client, whether it's speaking to a staff member, whether you're doing a sales presentation. It's like if you can be really clear about what the intended outcome is, well, then that in itself is going to reduce the stress and anxiety. Yeah. And I think it's great what you say, because we do it as well, is like getting clear beforehand.
Yes.
So, if you're just about to go into even just a meeting with the bank to want to get a loan for something, now be clear before you go in of like, well, the intended outcome is a 10 grand loan or whatever. But if you can get clear before it, then you get out of the way everything that's happened that morning, like the burnt toast, getting caught in traffic, being a minute late, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's gone.
You can let that all go and then just go in there and be focused on achieving whatever the intended outcome is. That's a great tip,